Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about the spell rework in patch 3.29 and what it means for the game going forward. So this is the patch where GG finally wants to tackle Selfcast or Handcast, whatever you want to call it. And the way this archetype usually worked is until you get into very late game and you play stuff like Spark or just very comfortable skills, it's not really something you will see on Leaguestart ever other than stuff like Archmage, as you've seen. And back in the day, the meta was mostly dominated by trigger skills like Cast on Crit. But then that archetype kind of deteriorated over time. It didn't really get many tools where other archetypes did. And then last league, they also removed Awakened Cast on Critical Strike, giving a final pretty rough blow. Other than that, what you'll see a lot on Leaguestart is mines and traps because they have more and easier scaling options, and they do stuff like auto-targeting, for example, on mines, so they're just more comfy to use. But if we look back, this is actually the wrong one. I wanted to look at the day 2. I usually like to do day 2 instead of day 1, and we can look at what was played last patch. Kinetic Fusillade, Elemental Hit were kind of dominating the top spots. After that, you have the RF as per usual. Absolutions of the minion players are still leveling. Sunder, slams are extremely strong. And then the first real entry we have is down here at 2% Shock Nova of Procession, which over time also went down and then up again when people used some very strong uniques, which once again got nerfed. KB already starting, and then we just see a slew of attack builds, like for example, Lightning Arrow, Peacock of Bouncing. Glacial Cascade of the Fissure is a mine build, so it is not really anything they want in this patch. In fact, they nerfed mines. And then we can see, if we really scroll it down, we see Ice Nova, Frostbolt all the way down there in the low 2%ers, and that's an Archmage archetype, which also got nerfed. And then we go down. So if we're talking about the skills that get affected by this patch, or should get affected by this patch, we're talking about skills that start at best at 1%. But let's look at the latest snapshot. This is now the end game representation. The other one was the Leaguestart one. And here we see Blade Vortex. Wow, spells are fine, right? Well, that was basically just minion pact carrying, which got reworked, so that's not going to be a thing anymore. In fact, Blade Vortex as a standalone skill is pretty damn mediocre. And then we can see all the normal skills that you've already seen. Down here, the first entry you're going to see is Shock Nova Procession, because some of the later Spellcaster builds needed a comfy skill, and that's that. And otherwise, you will always see Spark, because Spark is just very comfy as well. Other than that, there's really not all that much. You still have like 1% Glacial Cascade for the mine skills. So going into this patch, when you hear spell rework, you would think, oh, there's going to be fireworks, because last time we had a rework of an underused class, we had the melee rework, and look at what happened. We now have Slammers on top, we have Elemental Hit on top, we have a lot of these in-between skills that are actually really good. Cyclone is even being played again, and what happened back then? So let's see what these skills actually got. So if you don't remember, this was patch 3.25, and we're looking at some of the buffs. Bladestorm, underused skill, still not really played, but it's actually a decent option now. Well, it got buffed from 150 to 291%. That's almost double damage. Bladestorm of Uncertainty, 347, 180, almost double damage. We're talking absolute hitters. And this goes down the line. The only melee skills that didn't get double damage or more were skills that were already played, that still got buffed by like 60%. So needless to say, the spell rework is going to be insane, right? Well, no, you're more going to see buffs like this, where something gets a 14% faster cast time and then also has more mana cost to compensate for that for whatever reason that I have no idea. You will see like 10% more damage. You will see sometimes 20, sometimes 30% more damage. And then you have some reworks which are not made equal. Now let's get this out of the way. Winter Orb rework was pretty damn strong. And what you will see with a lot of these skills is they really didn't go ham on the damage increases. They mostly just gave some skills a lot of QL. So for example, Commendable, Freezing Pulse Change. This gives them 5 projectiles, and maybe this 5 projectiles actually scales into even 7 with extra projectile levels. So Freezing Pulse is now a skill that you can clear with. The damage is still abhorrent, and you have something like a damage fall off the further out the Freezing Pulse goes. So still not probably going to be played, but I like the attempt. Soul-Rend of Reaping, it has 400 damage effectiveness, so it's among the higher level spells. And then it also has 10 base crit now, and it has 5 projectiles. This skill is actually decent now. So there's a few things in here. You have Winter Orb, right? You have Ethereal Knives. Those are fine, but let's talk about the rest. Now, this patch, they were trying to give different spells different themes. So fire spells, for example, have Fireball, let's say, more damage, less crit, less mana cost, and then also some other changes. Lightning skills are faster cast time. I guess Stormcall maybe. Stormcall, faster cast time. This one also got a little bit of a damage buff, but most lightning skills did not. And then they also increased the mana cost. So yeah, double dipping on having to spend a lot more mana per second there. And then cold skills are kind of mid-tier anything, and also freeze gens. So you have, for example, stuff like Cold Snap. Across the board, all these 6 or 5% crit skills went up to 7.5, and a lot of them also got a base freeze chance of 25%, so you don't need to crit anymore to freeze. And then you have fizz skills, which are overall the biggest winners of this patch, which got a base crit increase from 6 to 10% across the board, and 10% crit is extremely strong, especially with some of the assassin reworks that we've seen, and lots of them also got other adjustments, especially Ethereal Knives is a pretty big deal because this skill is just very, very comfy to play in endgame. What you will see across the board is you will not see them buff stuff by 60, 80, 90% or anything like that. It will mostly be piecemeal. It will be very small buffs and adjustments across the board, as if handcasting or self-casting was already part of the meta. At least that's how it feels like. And the biggest thing I want to talk about here, and the biggest miss of these changes, is the mana cost adjustments. And here we have to talk about the global change. Sources of reduced mana cost are now mana cost efficiency. So if you play PoE2, you know what that means. But if you don't, reduced mana cost in Path of Exile 1 actually means that if you get 100% reduced mana cost, your skill will cost 0. But with the mana cost efficiency formula, if you have 100% mana cost efficiency, it cuts the mana cost in half, but it has diminishing returns. It gets worse and worse. So for example, at 200%, you would not go to 25 mana cost, you would go to 33 and so on. So what will happen is archetypes that could exactly pinpoint how much mana they're going to spend will now spend a ton more. Now, obviously they changed this. It's not one-to-one. In a lot of cases, they doubled it, but that is, funnily enough, not enough in any way, shape, or form for a lot of these casters to sustain their mana. So now you're going to say, well, pal, the mana costs were already an issue even before this patch, so people still made it work, right? They used stuff like Wrathpith Globe, they did mana stacking, they went to a point with Int where they have so much mana, so at some point it just doesn't become an issue anymore, right? Well, you would be right, but they also nerfed all of those. Wrathpith Globe got the PoE2 treatment and is now 3% spell crit per 100 and 3% spell damage per 100 instead of 5%. Jiquani's got almost cut in half in terms of its scaling, more like a third shaved off. And then we have stuff like Archmage, which got nerfed from 16 to 14%, and that mana archetype also got nerfed by the adjustment of Arcane Cloak from 14 down to 10, although it's actually 11 because they did increase the quality, so it goes from 14 to 11. So you might say, that's weird. So in order to cast my spell, I have to go into one of these niches of spellcasters, otherwise it's just not going to work out. But all of these are nerfed, and then I have these tiny buffs. So what does that actually mean when we put it into a build? What it means is you're going to pick up Arc next league. If you play Archmage, you're actually going to deal less or the same amount of damage, and you have a higher mana cost. And just to be clear, Arc is not a great skill right now. Neither are most of these other skills on this list. So this mana cost increase and the mana cost efficiency changes are a mystery to me. So how are you going to tackle that on Leaguestart? First is you're still going to play nerfed Archmage. So yeah, you just have to find a skill that maybe got buffed more than Archmage got nerfed, and there you go. Archmage is still going to be good. I just want to make that crystal clear. Elementalist right here has the Golem node, which with the Lightning Golem will give you an absolute crap ton of extra mana regen. This is flat mana regen, and it scales up with Golem effect. Then you have EB Mom, which fell a little bit out of favor. If you don't know, that is Eldritch Battery plus Mind over Matter. Eldritch Battery right here makes it so Energy Shield is over your mana, and you can actually pay costs with it, but the recharge gets a little bit slower. And then Mind over Matter makes it so you take mana before life, which means that Energy Shield over your mana can still be used defensively. And this combination used to be really, really strong back when Divine Blessing was a thing. Fell out of favor. You will see a lot of this patch. And then a little bit of a rogue pick that I love is Malachi Simula. This is something I've used on day 1, day 2 a lot. It gives you blood magic, so it makes it so you can only use one aura with Eternal Blessing. But that also fixes your mana cost. And it's not like Life Tap, because Life Tap is a little bit of a rough fix, because life tap also triples your life cost because it has the cost and reservation multiplier of 300%. But Blood Mage, 1-to-1 mana to life. And if you're something like an Inquisitor, which probably means you go EB Mom, but let's say you have some kind of regen that can actually counteract that, or even just life leech, then you're going to be fine on this. Obviously not an endgame solution, but I would think a lot more people are going to use this item. So other than some outliers, I think that Leaguestart will not be very spell ridden. It will be Winter Orb, and it will be a few other choices, but it's not going to be because it's that much stronger. It's going to be because people just want to play Spellcasters now, and that is fine. But in total, these changes will not amount to much extra power creep early on. And if we're looking at endgame, Archmage got nerfed. Instacking got nerfed with Jiquanis. Wrathpith Globe builds like Energy Blade and Lifestack got nerfed. But then we have one clear winner, which is Power Charge Stack. So TLDR for Power Charge Stack is overall, there's no more synthesized items. So that means no more Power Charge, +1 Power Charge synthesized rings. However, there's a whole Talisman rework where you can now get a +1 Power Charge implicit. With Eyes of the Great Wolf, it will even be possible to technically get a +2 power charge, but will that really beat a Badge of the Brotherhood? Probably not. So what you're most likely going to see is a lot of people run a Badge of the Brotherhood with a +1 power charge corruption. And you can have +1 power charge on rings as well, which means you can have stuff like Foulborn Ramirez, which has already +1 power charge, corrupted, and instead of bleeding immune, you will have +1 power charge here, mirror it over, get a total of +4 power charges just from your ring. So it's gonna get pretty damn crazy. But aside from that, we also got Pacts. So there's 4 new Pacts. They're going to be Selfcast, Val, Channel Skills, and there's another one which I don't actually know if they talked about that. And they're all exceptional gems, which means that you cannot just get them. This is power that you can buy, and we don't know how expensive it's going to be. These are named off of Gore, Bida, like the Beyond bosses, so most likely they're going to drop from the Beyond bosses, and one is named after Lycia, so probably from Sanctum. Now, looking at, for example, Pact of Beta, it looks ridiculous, right? 35% more damage. Empowered skills affect areas around you. You get extra chains, extra projectiles. It's going to be great clear, but also on some skills, this will have a lot of shotgun potential. So on the surface, a great change, but I have 2 questions. The first one is, why is there no early game version of this? Why is this only on exceptional? I would have really loved for this to be like, I don't know, a level 38 gem or something that you can get during campaign as a lot weaker version, but something that already accustoms you to that new playstyle, or at least gives you a little bit of an extra buff early on. But this is basically power that you will have to buy. And as we talked about, power that you will have to buy, Spellcasters already had with Wrathpith, Globe, Jiquanis, all these items that got nerfed, that kind of already existed. So the difference between this being 1 divine or being 20 plus divines is going to be huge, because a lot of people will want these gems, and we just simply do not know. There is no free version, which I find odd and a missed opportunity. The second thing is, and this is the biggest thing here, and I cannot for the life of me understand why this is not getting talked about. This is an extra button for your build. How do people... Okay, so as far as we know, this cannot be automated. If it ends up being able to be automated somehow that I can't see, then sure. With the conventional methods, apparently we cannot, at least according to Andrew, but maybe it can be automated, and then everything I'm about to say is wrong. People pay Miras so they can play a skill that's a 1 button in endgame. People are complaining about mana, but they could just press a mana fast, but they don't want to, right? Like, that is a game-defining thing. And now you put all this power into a skill that you probably have to press once every 4 to 5 seconds. People are already complaining about stuff like having to press a life flask every 7 seconds on Pathfinder, or 2-button skills are for 90% of the player base completely unplayable on Leaguestart, right? Like, people want comfiness, and then you're giving them this end game item that actually makes you press another button. So I am extremely curious if you cannot automate this, if how this is going to go. Like, if this is actually something where people will feel good about it. I really hope that it ends up being able to get somehow triggered. Overall, cool idea. It's not as bad as Warcries by any means, but yeah, I would have really liked an early game version of it. But then we have to talk about the Ascendancy Changes as well, because it will inform the archetype that you're about to play, which is Selfcast, right? So Inquisitor, first and foremost, got the Assassin node transferred over, Instruments of Justice. So here, this one, Mystical Infusion, is now on Inquisitor. And it's going to be right behind Instruments of Virtue, which is a little bit awkward because you now have to take Battle Mage, and Battle Mage is a little bit outdated. So it will be right here So it's like a 4-pointer. It will be an extremely expensive Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame, because on a wand, you can get around 12 base crit. And then some of the fire skills, for example, just got their damage buffed, but their crit decreased. So they really want this just to set it to like 12 base crit or so. So extremely, extremely strong Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame. Taking it is maybe a little bit more sketchy. Then we have Assassin, which is the most hype rework out of all of them. It got 2 things. The first one is bifurcated critical strikes. This is a mechanic from PoE2. If you don't know what it means, it rolls twice. If you don't crit on the first one, you get lucky crit. And then if you hit both rolls as a crit, you actually get 100% more critical strike damage, which comes out to around 78% more damage if you have 100% crit. But it does have a downside of 30% less spell critical strike chance right here. It's basically for power charge stackers that have too much crit, so you have to actually get to 143% crit to make full use of this node. So this node is completely ridiculous, outrageous. The Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flames are gonna cost over 100 divines. Ridiculous. And then the last thing we have is the Occultist change, which I wanna highly caution you from going for this. There's a new notable. You get Spirit Infusions, and every stack of Spirit Infusion gives you damage, more cost, but also faster start of Energy Shield Recharge. So in a perfect scenario, you get this times 5, which is 150% faster start. You get 50% more damage, and then everything costs 100% more. However, if you think at how this is actually going to play out, you lose 1 stack every 0.5 seconds if you have not gained a stack in the past 2 seconds, right? So you have to at least gain a stack every 2 seconds. But it takes a full second of channeling to get a stack. So in order to keep this up, you would have to, for half of the time of your mapping, cast it. So even on bosses, you will have to move sometimes. And sure, you can do stuff like Frostblink, which isn't technically moving and whatnot. But I just want to remind you how awkward this will be. I would definitely not plan around this node, even if you are a channeling build, especially if you're Winter Orb, which wants to be on the fly all the time. This node will be right behind here. The good thing for you is Occultist is stacked as is, so you can try out the node if you want to, be warned, but you're not going to be bleeding for nodes regardless, so yeah, you're going to be fine. Next up, Staves. They got buffed. They have better stats on the weapon itself now, so a little bit extra block in the implicit, and also slightly better spell damage modifiers in general. It has extra levels. It is overall a good change. Mana Infused Staff is now a thing where this block themed, where you activate it and you get this retaliation whenever you block, which probably not going to do that much, let's be real. You have 30% less mana cost of skills, which can come in handy, and then 24% more chance to block, attack, and spell. To be clear, that's actually worse than just 24 block because it scales off of your existing block, so it's pretty bad overall. Not sure it's 30% reservation. I'm not huge on this one. You probably going to use it though because you're going to need the less mana cost as we talked about. Also, some of the unique staves got buffed, for example, Terran's Shiver. Okay. But the problem with staves is really one of movement skills, and good staves already existed. If you look at any bosser, they use Annihilating Light. This staff is actually ridiculous if you don't know. Deal triple damage, and the only downside is reduced Res. And sure, you could say, but you need to go ZHB. You really don't. You can actually make up the resistances as well. Run this staff, and it comes out to be a really good staff. But people don't do it because it's a staff, and you cannot use Shield Charge. And on Leaguestart, Shield Charge is just kind of like a cheat code where you don't have your Mage Blood movement speed yet. You do not have enough cast speed to make Frostblink of Windshreed Blast really fun. So Shield Charge will have to do, and you just cannot do that with a staff. On top of that, shields still have really good defensive stats that you cannot get on a staff, and that's not just block. Also, shields can get upward of 40% block still and have way better support on the passive tree. Okay, so TLDR, what are the biggest winners of this patch? The first one is easy, Winter Orb. In terms of changes, Winter Orb can actually shotgun, so adding these extra projectiles is a huge damage buff, and it got buffed a lot more than any of these other skills on the list. Winter Orb wasn't that great to begin with, but it is mechanically extremely strong, so once you get to a point where it does decent damage, you will see a lot more people play it because it's just a really fun skill, right? It also got a freeze change, which I guess is relevant for leveling. Pretty cool. A little bit of extra crit as well. Very good. You'll see this will be the #1 played skill this patch. Whether it's the strongest, I mean, hard to say, but it is very good. Fizz skills, especially EK and BB of unloading. The thing about Fizz skills is they will always be played in endgame because of how Headhunter stacks. Headhunter is just extremely strong because it has Fizz as extra. And Ethereal Knives is one of the most comfortable spells to play. I want to caution you though, because a lot of people are looking at the EK buffs, which are huge, but people actually didn't use normal Ethereal Knives. They used EK of the Massacre, which is the one that goes like a Nova around you. So if you don't have something like Nemesis, then yeah, you're using this. And it is a lot better clear speed than actually having to aim with Ethereal Knives. And Ethereal Knives of Massacre only got the crit buff. It did not get all these other buffs, so just keep that in mind. Those are not the only Fizz skills that got buffed though. All the Blade Blasts were already decent. They're a little bit hard to make work, but now they got buffed quite a bit. So Blade Blast of Unloading was already an interesting skill. There's a lot of cheese around getting Blade Vortex stacks to detonate with Blade Blast of Unloading, and people have already played it. So this skill going from 6 to 10 crit and getting more AoE is huge. You will see Blade Blast of Unloading. I'm not really sure if it's going to be a first build, but on the second build and fourth on, you will see it. Even normal Blade Blast could be made work with something like Spellslinger. These will be played this patch. And then we have Soul Rend of Reaping, which is going a little bit under the radar, I feel like. Soul Rend of Reaping is used to be just one projectile, and it's basically a hit-based. So it just one straight chaos projectile, and but if you look at it, you see 400% damage effectiveness is quite high. It has no shotgunning potential, but it just got 5 projectiles for clear, so you can now actually clear with it without having to use greater multiple projectiles, which is insane. So that's huge. But then it also got a ton of extra crit. So for example, for mines, this is extremely interesting because it overrides the 0.8 second cast time. I think we're going to see the skill. And finally, cast on crit. Now, why do I say cast on crit? It's mostly because of the assassin changes, because cast on crit can use both the death mark because it has an attack component. So the assassin's mark gets applied automatically, and it can use the bifurcate. And remember that the bifurcate downside is only less spell critical strike chance. So it does not scuff your attack side of all things. So I think for cast on crit, this might be a comeback after it got nerfed last league because Awakened cast on crit is gone. But I think we will be seeing these builds again. So what is my takeaway all in all? A handful of skills, like for example, Winter Orb, are now actually playable. They did get enough, and they will be played. Even on Leaguestart, that is about all I can say. A lot of the skills will still remain unplayable. The arcs, I mean, some of these literally did not get buffed. If you just put them into PoB and then you have to solve for the increased mana cost now, you will notice that the buff actually vanishes immediately. All of these skills were played with Archmage on Leaguestart, which got nerfed as well. So guess what? A lot of these skills will actually deal slightly less damage than before. Okay. But some of them will be playable, so in that case, it is a win. Also, do note that Andrew said we will still be getting dot skills in the patch notes afterwards. It has, as of Monday right now, it has not happened yet, but it will be in the coming days, and maybe we'll also see the missing Transfigure gem. For dot skills, though, they would have to literally double the damage of some of them. So looking at the buffs that we have been given here, highly unlikely we're going to see a resurgence, but I hope I'm wrong. Mana costs this patch, next takeaway, will be rough. If you don't do one of the things that I talked about in this list, which is, for example, like I said, Elementalist with Lightning Golem and whatnot, or EB Mom, then you will have a tough time, or you're going to be spamming your mana flask. Not saying you can't do it, just have a plan is all I'm saying. The exceptional gems, the Pacts, I really like the idea, although once again, having to press an extra button while mapping, a lot of people are not going to like, and the fact that there's no early game version of it and it might cost upwards of 20 divines for all we know is a little bit weird. And I also don't know if I necessarily like the end game changes that they made, nerf Jiquani, nerf Wrathpith Globe, but then Power Church stackers are just going to be everywhere this patch. So it's going to be actually a lot more, I think it's actually going to be less build diversity in terms of spellcasters, in terms of what template they're going to use to deal damage once, yeah, you get 100 plus divines, but that will have to be seen. All in all, though, if I had to give a rating here, I do not really like these changes. I don't think it's a complete miss, but overall, I would tend to be a little bit more on the negative side than on the positive side here. I think the melee rework was great in 3.25, for example, so I'm not really sure, but I'm so hesitant because the melee rework, the only really thing they screwed up was obviously the slam stuff and lightning, why they doubled lightning strikes damage, nobody knows. But other than that, this was a lot more milquetoast than back then. But there's a lot of factors we don't know right now, and there's still 4 to 5 days to come until patch notes. And as we know, they're a lot more aggressive with their changes when they see that people are not happy with something leading up to release. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Did I miss anything? Do you think I'm too doomer? Do you think I'm too nice? Whatever. But those are my thoughts on the Spellcaster meta. For me personally, I don't know if any of these skills really speaks to me. I know everybody's going to play Winter Orb, so I'm not really that interested. There's going to be a lot of people who have their guides. There's not really much input there that's needed. Maybe I'll find something until Leaguestart. Maybe there's still some patch notes, but otherwise there's a good chance on the first few days I'm going to play Kinetic Fuse a lot until I actually have some gear, but has to be seen. But yeah, that's about all I got. More videos to come, and since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.